guys, it's Bree, and in today's video I wanted to talk to you guys and share my story regarding my eating disorder and battle with anorexia and bulimia. Now, before I get started, I don't know if you can see this little turd down here. I'm sorry if there's any distractions or noises or anything like that. I apologize for the distractions, but he's just gonna do better here with me. So if I had a video like this to watch when I was going through my eating disorder, I feel like it would have helped me tremendously. I feel like in doing this video, at least I'm hoping that it will help some people. So here I am, I'm finally sitting down to tell you guys my story. When I was younger, I was pretty oblivious to like body image issues or anything like that. I was a huge tomboy. All I wanted to do was like play sports and play in the dirt and hang out with my friends. My entire childhood growing up was so focused on basketball, it consumed every single day of my life. Honestly, from the time that I was old enough to get my fingers around a basketball as a really, really young girl to all the way up through college until, you know, I couldn't play anymore. At some point you get to a certain age and you can't play anymore. So I played every single day for hours on end until I was in college, and I had a lot of my childhood was very, very, very difficult for me, and I don't want to get into the gory details of it all just because it involves other people other than me, and out of respect for them, I just don't want to kind of lay all of my family's dirt out for the world to see. That's just not where I'm at right now. I don't know if I'll ever be there. But for the purpose of this video, it's important that you know a little bit, but I'm not going to share everything. Basketball was kind of something that was very important to me, but it was also something that was made kind of like my worst nightmare. My dad was somebody who was very involved in my basketball career. He was somebody that would give up everything for his kids to make them better, and he did that for me, and it was something I really, really appreciated, but it was also something that he did some really, really hurtful things that made basketball a source of stress, and it kind of made it not fun too. I was one of those kids that was kind of naturally talented. If I picked up anything, I was just sort of naturally really good at it. And because of that, everybody sort of putting this pressure on me that I needed to be perfect and I had all this talent and I was going to be great. It's like I didn't want that. But at the same time, this was my identity. I didn't give a shit about anything else. I did the bare minimum in school just so I could stay eligible to play basketball. And I was having kind of like an identity crisis throughout my years of playing basketball, just because of some of the stuff I had to kind of deal with as a child that made basketball something that was like beautiful and ugly at the same time. And so that's kind of where my identity crisis sort of started. Anyway, I played basketball all the way through college. I played at a JC, and then I went to a university and finished off my 2 years there. And even then, I didn't think too much about my body, in a sense that like I was just working so fucking hard that I was just thin, and I am kind of just naturally thin, but I was never like consumed with like being super skinny until the university. And there was one girl in particular who was actually a really good friend of mine who seemed to be very obsessed with kind of like her appearance and being thin and being skinny and working out. And we had like a group of us that were super, super, super close, and it was all of us girls on the team. And we were out like drinking one time, and I don't remember how the conversation came up. Somehow it came up, and she said, I used to be bulimic. And it sort of came out of nowhere. And I didn't even know much about it. I'm just like, what are you talking about? And she's like, I had an eating disorder. And she said it very nonchalant, which also sort of like rattled me a little bit. Like, wait a minute, what? Like, isn't this like a sickness? Like, why are you just talking about it like it's no big deal? And she said, yeah, I used to like make myself throw up because like where you could eat anything you want, just make yourself throw up and you don't gain any weight and you still look thin. So, and then she was like, but I don't do that anymore. And I remember feeling so sad for her, like just so heartbroken that this is something that she went through. And I was so mad at her too. I was so angry that somebody would do something so harmful to themselves and treat their body, their vessel, everything that they have, just abuse it and treat it like shit. I couldn't understand it. And I actually told her, if you ever do that again, I'm gonna kick your ass. Like, cut the shit, don't ever do that again. You promised me you won't ever do that again. Thinking it was so fucking easy, right? Like, just to promise and then it all goes away. And she was like, oh, never, of course. I'm just like, that's so far, so far gone. I honestly didn't think really about it again until basketball was over. Once that was over, it was bittersweet. It was like, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. But at the same time, it literally consumed every single day of my life. Even when you're not in season and you're not playing, you're training. So it's literally every day of your life. And all of a sudden, it's gone. It almost happened overnight, just that depression sunk in, like, well, now what? Who am I? If there's no basketball, who am I? Who the fuck is Bree? No idea. And I had a complete loss of identity. I completely panicked. I got incredibly depressed. And just to make everything better, I kept that all inside. I didn't know how to deal with it. At the time, I didn't know it was a loss of identity. I just felt sort of lost in the world, and I just didn't know what the next step was. And I, unfortunately, was never one of those people that was like born knowing what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And to be around all these people that were like going to nursing school, or they were going to, be a therapist, or they were going to be a doctor, or they were going to be like, it seemed like everyone around me had a plan and I had nothing. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And like I said, I literally went through high school, junior college, and a university, just taking bullshit classes that I needed to take so I could be eligible to play. And when that was over, it's like I had taken so many of these random classes that nothing was really leading towards one particular degree. And so I also found out that I was like 2 years out still after all this fucking schooling from getting like a bachelor's degree. And I did get my associate's degree at the junior college, so at least I managed to get something accomplished. But I was still 2 years out from a bachelor's degree, and now I'm struggling with, I have no purpose in life anymore, and I have no motivation, and I have no discipline, and I have no drive. Like, when you're part of a sport for so long, you're used to people dictating your life. And when that's over, you're really left with yourself like, okay, well, now I'm here alone and I got to figure this out. What do I want to do? And I had no idea. I didn't have the slightest clue what I wanted to do. College is a place where, like, guys were like paying attention to me. And even though I had a boyfriend, I was getting all this like positive attention about how thin I was and how great I looked, and people thought I was pretty. And I feel weird saying this because I don't want it to sound like I'm conceited. This is just things that people told me, like, you could be a model and you should be a model and you're so thin and you have the height. And it's almost like when basketball was over, I started feeling the pressure of my physical appearance as like, well, if I look like you, I would totally try and be a model. Like, why would you just not use that to your advantage and make money on it? Like, and so here I am again, faced with the same message that's, you have this natural, instead of this natural talent to play basketball, Now I'm hearing you have this natural beauty, you should be a model, but you don't want to do anything with it. What a waste. And so throughout my life, I've just felt like I was never good enough. And I felt so guilty. I can't even express to you guys the guilt I felt for not becoming a basketball superstar and not becoming, like, not pursuing any type of modeling career. Like, it wasn't okay that I just do maybe none of those if I don't want to. Like, that was never okay. And so at some point in the midst of this identity crisis, I don't remember like the moment the transition happened. I just remember like I wasn't really working out anymore. And so all of a sudden I kind of became aware of like, I'm gaining a little bit of weight. It was like a couple pounds, but I wasn't like running and working it off. And so I started noticing that I was putting on a little bit of weight and I didn't want to do that. And those like bad thoughts kind of started coming into my head. And I remember that conversation that I had with my friend that said, you can't eat what you want, just throw it up. What's the big deal? And it was really presented to me like it's not that big of a deal. I was that little girl when I got sick with the flu. I would hold my mom and hysterically cry because I was so afraid of throwing up. And now here I am standing over a toilet with my finger down my throat, making this happen. That sort of just progressed and it became something that was easier and easier and easier to do. And sometimes if I didn't want to throw up, then I would just completely starve myself and I wouldn't eat anything more than like 5 crackers. And oh my God, the calorie counting. Oh God, I became so obsessed with calorie counting. It is a monster. It is a monster of a disease and it is so consuming and it consumes every thought of every single day. Every thought you have is about food and you struggle with this one kind of evil thing telling you that you are too fat and you really shouldn't have eaten that. Why would you eat that? Go throw it up. You're a disgusting fat human being. And then you have that other side of you that's like, I want out of this. You're never like, it's nothing you're happy about. I mean, it's the worst thing to deal with. And the shame you feel when you have an eating disorder is overwhelming. It is overwhelming and you beat the shit out of yourself. You really, really do. Mentally and physically, you just destroy your body and it literally takes up every second of every single day. During this time, I was with my boyfriend, who I'd been with for a long time, and we ended up getting married. And I actually hid it from my husband for a good year. And finally, it got to a point where I needed to tell everybody because it got so strong that I couldn't fight this battle by myself anymore. And I finally told my husband and I cried hysterically and I went over to my brother's house and sat down with my sister and I cried to them. And then I told my parents and everything and we all had like a sit down thing where I just confessed that this is what I'm struggling with. So after I told my family members, I felt right away, I felt an outpouring of support and love, and I felt like, okay, now I have this army with me that's going to help me get through it. And at the same time I felt like that, it's almost like it got worse, because now when you tell your family and they don't have the tools to deal with it, once they know, you feel like everybody watches you like a hawk, and they do. They watch everything you do. They watch everything that you eat because they don't know what to do. It's a crazy thing. It's like you have to eat. It's the one disease where you like have to be in it. It's in your face every single day. But at the same time, it's like it would be like an alcoholic, but you have to have a beer every day. Like it's just horrible in that regard, and it's a pain. So after I told my parents, I went and saw a therapist. And I saw her one-on-one for a while. And then she said that the thing that tends to help people with eating disorders are group meetings. And at first I was like, I don't fucking care I have no desire to sit in a room full of people and share my story with them. Like, that's just so scary. Like, the thought of it was traumatizing. Like, I just didn't want to do it. But she said, to trust her and that it would help. And so I said, okay. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad that I was courageous enough to sit with a group of people and talk about something so embarrassing. And it's great in that you're not alone. Like, everything you say, you're in a room full of people that understand exactly what you're saying, and you're hearing their stories, and you're like, oh my God, this is like, I totally get it. I thought that I had my eating disorder completely under control. I thought I had all the tools, and I sat in that, group meetings, and I'd be like, wow, these people are really fucked up and they're kind of getting nowhere, but I got my shit under control. I feel like I'm good. And so I removed myself from the therapy sessions. And what I thought was good was just my eating disorder kind of manifesting itself in another way. And I became just obsessive about working out. I thought that I had it under control, and I thought this was a really healthy way to deal with it. It's not until I kind of was out of my eating disorder and I looked back and just went, wow, I was really just replacing one illness with another. And that's the one thing I caution anybody with an eating disorder, anybody who has a loved one who's has an eating disorder, is pay attention to those things. If you don't overcome it fully, it's going to manifest itself in other ways. And so for me, it did, and it was working out. One of the things, because this is kind of important to say, and I forgot to mention it, my parents had come with me to one of my sessions, and the therapist had given them books to read. And there's a lot of really great information out there for people who are not necessarily in the eating disorder, but loved ones of people who are in that disease and who have that disease. And they got those books and everything, and they never really looked into them. And I don't know if it was because it seemed like I was overcoming my eating disorder, which I was doing really well. But it was like, I felt like they didn't care. Having an eating disorder is so isolating. You literally feel so alone. It doesn't matter how many people are around you. You feel like you are so alone. And when they didn't read those books to kind of educate themselves on how to deal with somebody with an eating disorder, I felt even more alone. And I never said anything about it. I never told them I was devastated. And that was a mistake. When you're going through this, you really need to vocalize to other people, because they don't understand it. They don't know how to deal with it. And so the worst thing I did was keep it inside and just hold on to that resentment. And all that did was just make my eating disorder worse. So it's really important to communicate to other people what you're going through. And it's very important, number one, to tell people if you have an eating disorder. It's important to tell people that you're struggling with one. And also, my advice would be, if they don't read the books or they don't do anything to kind of support you, regardless of anybody else's support or not, you need to be your support system. You have to kind of stay on your course and stay with your therapy and stay with your tools and communicate that too. I wish I would have told them, like, you guys are ripping my heart out because you're not reading the books and the tools that were given. And I feel like even more so now I'm alone, and I never communicated that, and I really do regret that. I do, because they didn't know. At the end of the day, this was my disease, and this is something that was my job to take on and win that battle. So it was about a year, not even a year, probably like 6 months after my divorce, when I moved to San Francisco, and I was in a place where I didn't know anybody. I still had a loss of identity. I had no idea what I wanted to do or who I was. And I was coming off of a divorce. And at this time, I was abandoned by everybody in my family, they didn't understand it. And so they thought that, that I was kind of like the bad person. And so I felt very abandoned all over again. And these were feelings that I had struggled with in my childhood. I felt abandoned. And so here I am again dealing with this feeling of like, now I'm alone again. And so my bulimia came back again. I was never fully, I was more of a bulimic than I was an anorexic. I like to fucking eat my food. I was only like anorexic for a short period of time, kind of intermittently mixed in, if that makes sense. But for me, I was more of a bulimic. So when I moved to San Francisco, within the first year that I was there, I was kind of struggling, not even remotely close to what it was like, a couple years prior. It was just like occasionally I would throw up, or I would have a week that I felt really, really low and depressed, and I would make myself throw up. So I went to a therapist again in San Francisco, and I didn't really vibe with her a whole lot, and it's really fucking expensive, and San Francisco is like ridiculously expensive, so I didn't have a lot of money to play with, so therapy was really hard for me. And so honestly, I just had a heart-to-heart with myself. That's really what it was. And I said, Bree, you need to get your fucking shit together. It's time that you stop destroying your body. You need to learn to love yourself. You need to learn to accept yourself. And I slowly but surely, I did that. And I think it started with kind of like, I'm going to go a week without binging and purging. And then when I would get through that week, I'm going to go another week. And then if I kind of relapsed, I would say, I'm going to go 2 weeks without binging and purging. And I would set that as a goal. And I got to tell you, I felt so shitty during this time, because you're so used to getting rid of something that you don't want in your body. And it's sitting through the anxiety, and it's sitting through the pain, and it's sitting through the crazy, and it's sitting through all those shitty thoughts that you have. And it's sitting through those moments that made me defeat my eating disorder. For those of you that are struggling with this disease, just know that it's not going to be forever. That I can promise you. I know when you're struggling with an eating disorder, it's like you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know that feeling, and I promise you that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I promise you that one day you will overcome it, and you will look back and you will say, I am so glad that's over, but also I am so much stronger because of it, because I got through something so difficult. I mean, they say an eating disorder is one of the hardest things to get over. I cannot express this enough, that you need therapy. And if you're seeing a therapist that doesn't help you, then you need to see another therapist. It's important to have a support system around you. And if you can, get your friends and family involved in your healing and in your therapy. I didn't realize this until I was kind of out of my eating disorder, and even more so, like being on YouTube and all the messages that I get and everything. You would be surprised at how not alone you are. There are more women that struggle with this, and men, than you would ever guess. Than you would ever guess. For anybody that is watching this video that is not having, is not in the midst of an eating disorder themselves, as like a family member or a friend or anything like that, my biggest advice is to just be there in any way that they need you. Don't try to fix them, because you're not going to fix them. And my biggest advice, this is something that I had to sit down with my parents and tell them to like stop it. But they would tell me like, oh, there's only so many calories in this, or oh, there's only, you don't have to worry about this because there's only a little bit of fat in it. And I'm just like, listen, this is the worst thing you could do. I have an eating disorder. When I come over to your house for dinner, don't buy into my eating disorder. That is the biggest thing I learned in therapy, because I used to tell my ex-husband, don't bring my triggers into the house. And my therapist told me, your eating disorder is your problem. It is not fair to make it his problem. This is your issue, and you are not allowed to control the environment around you to fit your disorder. And I remember, like, when she said that, I was even like, fuck you, bitch. Like, what are you talking about? It's so true, though. It's so true. You cannot control the people around you to fit within the four walls of your disease. It's not fair, and it's only going to make things worse. So for people that are family members or friends of loved ones that have an eating disorder, don't let them control you. All you can do is don't give up on them, and don't lose hope. Have nothing but love and compassion for them, and just let them know that you're there. If somebody says they want you to read a book, do it, because it will mean the world to them. And there's a million resources out there. They're there for a reason. They're there specifically for loved ones. And it will enlighten you and explain everything you need to know, and will show you how to deal with somebody with an eating disorder, because it's a crazy disease that affects everybody. I really hope that in sharing my story, I've helped somebody. That was my goal here. And for anybody that doesn't fit into either category, I just hope that maybe you learned a little bit more about me as your friend on YouTube. So I love you all so much, and I hope that you found this video helpful. I hope you are all having a great day, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys. Mwah.